solitude is not loneliness, it is self-discovery. And that is a truth many people struggle to accept in a world that constantly pushes connect as the only path to fulfillment. Loneliness feels like absence, like something is missing, like a void that needs to be filled by another person. Solitude, on the other hand, is presence. It is the quiet decision to be with yourself, to understand yourself, and to grow into someone you respect without needing constant external validation. When a person embraces solitude, they begin to hear their own thoughts more clearly. There are no distractions, no noise from others influencing their direction, no pressure to perform or impress. In that silence, something powerful begins to happen. You start asking yourself real questions. What do I truly want? What are my fears? What are my strengths? What kind of life am I trying to build? These are questions that often get buried under social expectations and relationships, but solitude brings them to the surface. It is in solitude that a man learns emotional independence. Instead of relying on someone else to comfort him, to validate him, or to define his worth, he becomes his own source of strength. He learns how to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. He understands his triggers, his insecurities, and his patterns, and over time, he begins to master them. This kind of inner work cannot be rushed, and it cannot be done in a crowded, noisy life. It requires space, patience, and honesty. Solitude also builds clarity. When you are constantly surrounded by opinions, expectations, and comparisons, it becomes difficult to know which path is truly yours. But when you step away and spend time alone, your vision becomes sharper. You begin to see what truly matters and what does not. You stop chasing things just because others are chasing them, and you start building a life that aligns with your own values and purpose. Another powerful aspect of solitude is that it teaches self-respect. When you are comfortable being alone, you no longer tolerate relationships that drain you or situations that compromise your peace. You are not desperate for attention or afraid of being by yourself, so you become selective about who and what you allow into your life. This creates a strong sense of boundaries, and with those boundaries comes a deeper sense of confidence. Many people fear solitude because they associate it with isolation, but the truth is, solitude is where growth happens. It is where discipline is formed, where creativity is unlocked, and where resilience is built. It is the space where you face yourself without filters, without distractions, and without excuses. And while that can be uncomfortable at first, it is also incredibly freeing. Over time, solitude transforms you. It turns confusion into clarity, weakness into strength, and dependence into independence. It teaches you that you are enough, not because someone else says so, but because you have done the work to understand and accept yourself fully. And once you reach that point, your relationship with the world changes. You no longer seek people to complete you, but rather to complement the life you have already built. Solitude is not about being cut off from the world. It is about reconnecting with yourself. It is about building a foundation so strong that no external situation can easily shake it. And in that space, you discover not just who you are, but who you are capable of becoming. Society's expectations often arrive quietly, shaping our beliefs long before we question them, and they can become so deeply rooted that they feel like truth rather than influence. From a young age, a man is taught what success should look like, how relationships should unfold, and what milestones he must achieve to be considered complete. There is a script that many are expected to follow: study, build a career, find a partner, settle down, and live in a way that aligns with what others approve of. And when a man steps outside of that script, especially when he chooses to live alone without a girlfriend, it creates tension between what society expects and what he knows to be true for himself. This tension is not always loud. Sometimes it appears in subtle questions, in judgmental glances, in comparisons that make him feel like he is falling behind. People may assume he is lonely, or that something is wrong, or that he has not yet figured life out. These assumptions are not necessarily based on reality, but on a collective belief system that equates companionship with happiness and independence with lack. Over time, if a man is not careful, these external voices can become internal doubts, making him question his own choices, even when they feel right. Personal truth, however, does not come from society, it comes from within. It is built through experience, reflection, and self-awareness. It is the quiet understanding of what genuinely brings peace, fulfillment, and purpose to one's life. For some, that may include relationships, but for others, especially at certain stages of life, it may mean focusing on growth, healing, and building a strong foundation without distraction. The challenge lies in having the courage to trust that inner voice even when it contradicts what everyone else seems to believe. Choosing personal truth over societal expectation requires strength. It means accepting that not everyone will understand your path, and that approval is not guaranteed. It requires letting go of the need to explain yourself constantly and instead becoming grounded in your own decisions. A man who does this begins to realize that he is not living to meet expectations. He is living to create a life that is authentic to him. There is also freedom in this choice. When a man stops trying to fit into a predefined mold, he opens himself up to possibilities that are more aligned with who he really is. He is no longer chasing timelines or comparing his journey to others. Instead, he moves at his own pace, guided by clarity rather than pressure. This allows him to build a life that is not only successful on the outside, but also meaningful on the inside. At the same time, this path is not always easy. There can be moments of doubt, moments where the weight of societal pressure feels heavy, moments where he wonders if it would be simpler to just conform. But those moments are part of the process. They test his commitment to his own truth. And each time he chooses himself, he becomes stronger and more certain. Over time, something shifts. The same society that once questioned him may begin to respect his confidence, his independence, and his clarity, not because he changed to fit their expectations, but because he remained consistent in who he is. His life becomes an example that there is more than one way to live, more than one definition of happiness, and more than one path to fulfillment. In the end, the conflict between society's expectations and personal truth is not about choosing one and rejecting the other completely. It is about understanding the difference and deciding which one deserves to guide your life. And for a man who lives alone without a girlfriend, that decision becomes a powerful statement, not of rebellion, but of self-awareness, of courage, and of a deep commitment to living a life that is genuinely his own. Emotional independence and strength are often misunderstood because many people assume they mean shutting others out or refusing to feel deeply, but in reality, they represent something far more powerful and balanced. Emotional independence is the ability to stand firmly within yourself, to understand your feelings without being controlled by them, and to not rely on others as the sole source of your stability or self-worth. It is not about isolation, it is about inner security. When a man develops emotional independence, he no longer depends on constant reassurance from others to feel valued. He does not need someone to tell him he is enough because he has already done the inner work to believe it himself. This does not mean he rejects support or connection, but rather that he does not collapse without it. His sense of identity remains intact, regardless of who enters or leaves his life. This kind of strength is built over time, often through moments of discomfort and challenge. It grows when a man faces rejection, disappointment, or solitude. And instead of avoiding those feelings, he sits with them and learns from them. He begins to understand his emotional patterns, his triggers and his fears. Rather than reacting impulsively, he becomes more aware, more controlled, and more intentional in how he responds. One of the most important aspects of emotional independence is the ability to regulate emotions. Life will always present difficult situations, but a strong man does not allow temporary emotions to dictate permanent decisions. He learns to pause, to reflect, and to choose his actions wisely. This creates a sense of stability not only within himself, but also in the way others perceive him. People feel safe around someone who is emotionally grounded, someone who does not react with chaos or unpredictability. Emotional strength also means being honest with oneself. It requires the courage to acknowledge weaknesses, insecurities, and unresolved issues. Many people avoid this level of self-reflection because it can be uncomfortable, but true growth comes from facing reality, not escaping it. A man who is emotionally independent does not hide from his flaws. He works on them. He sees them as areas for improvement rather than sources of shame. Another important element is resilience. Emotional independence allows a man to recover from setbacks without losing himself. Whether it is a failed relationship, a personal loss, or a difficult phase in life, he is able to process the experience, learn from it, and move forward without becoming or broken. He understands that pain is a part of life, but it does not define him. This strength also shapes the way he approaches relationships. Because he is not dependent on others for validation, he does not enter relationships out of desperation or fear of being alone. Instead, he chooses connections that add value to his life, not ones that fill a void. He is able to give without losing himself and to receive without becoming attached in an unhealthy way. This creates healthier, more balanced interactions. At times, emotional independence can be mistaken for distance, but the difference lies in intention. Distance is about avoidance, while independence is about balance. A man who is emotionally independent can still love deeply, care genuinely, and connect meaningfully, but he does so from a place of strength rather than need. He is present but not dependent, open but not fragile. Over time, this way of living builds a quiet confidence. It is not loud or attention-seeking, but it is steady and undeniable. It shows in the way he handles pressure, in the way he treats others, and in the way he carries himself through life. He does not crumble easily, and he does not seek constant approval. Emotional independence and strength are not developed overnight. They are the result of consistent effort, self-awareness, and a willingness to grow. They require patience, discipline, and a deep commitment to becoming better. But once they are built, they become one of the most valuable foundations a man can have, allowing him to navigate life with clarity, resilience, and a sense of control that cannot easily be shaken. Building purpose without validation is one of the most challenging yet empowering paths a person can take, because it requires letting go of the constant need for approval and learning to trust your own direction. In a world where recognition, likes, praise, and external success are often seen as measures of worth, it becomes easy to believe that purpose must be acknowledged by others to be real. But true purpose does not depend on applause. It is defined by meaning, consistency, and alignment with your inner values. When a man begins to build his purpose without seeking validation, he shifts his focus inward. Instead of asking, what will people think? He starts asking, what truly matters to me? This change in perspective is powerful because it removes the pressure to perform for others and replaces it with the responsibility to be honest with oneself. It allows him to pursue goals that feel meaningful, even if they are not immediately understood or appreciated by those around him. At first, this path can feel uncertain. Without external feedback, there are moments of doubt, moments where progress feels invisible, and moments where it seems like nothing is working. This is where most people give up or turn back to seeking validation because it provides quick reassurance. But a man who is committed to his purpose learns to push through this phase. He understands that not all progress is visible, and that some of the most important growth happens quietly behind the scenes. Building purpose without validation also requires discipline. Without the motivation of recognition, the only thing that keeps a man moving forward is his own commitment. He must show up consistently, even when no one is watching, even when there is no immediate reward. This kind of discipline builds character because it is driven by intention rather than attention. It creates a strong foundation that is not easily shaken by external opinions or temporary setbacks. Another important aspect of this journey is learning to detach from comparison. When a man stops seeking validation, he also stops measuring his progress against others. He understands that every path is different and that comparing his journey to someone else's only creates unnecessary pressure. Instead, he focuses on his own growth, his own pace, and his own goals. This creates a sense of freedom, allowing him to move forward without feeling like he is constantly behind or not doing enough. There is also a deep sense of authenticity that comes with building purpose in this way. When actions are not driven by the desire to impress, they become more genuine. A man begins to act in alignment with who he truly is, rather than who he thinks he should be. This authenticity not only strengthens his sense of self, but also makes his journey more fulfilling because it is rooted in truth rather than performance. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The same purpose that once felt invisible starts to take shape. Results begin to appear, not because they were chased for validation, but because of consistent effort and clarity of direction. Ironically, this is often when recognition starts to come, but by then, it no longer holds the same power. A man who has built his purpose without validation does not depend on that recognition to feel accomplished. He sees it as a byproduct, not a goal. This approach also builds resilience. When validation is not the driving force, criticism and rejection lose their impact. A man becomes less affected by opinions because his sense of direction is not tied to them. He listens, he learns when necessary, but he does not allow external voices to control his path. This creates a level of mental strength that is essential for long-term success. In the end, building purpose without validation is about ownership. It is about taking full responsibility for your life, your choices, and your direction without waiting for someone else to approve or acknowledge them. It is about understanding that purpose is not something given by the world, but something created from within. And when a man fully embraces this, he becomes unstoppable in a quiet, steady way, driven not by the need to be seen, but by the desire to become. Love begins within, not from others. And this idea challenges one of the most deeply rooted beliefs people carry throughout their lives. Many grow up thinking that love is something to be found, something that exists outside of them, waiting in another person. They believe that once they meet the right partner, everything will fall into place. Their emptiness will disappear, their doubts will fade, and their life will feel complete. But this expectation places a heavy burden on relationships because it asks another person to provide something that can only be built from within. When a man understands that love begins within, he starts to shift his perspective. Instead of searching for someone to fill a void, he begins to focus on understanding and accepting himself. He learns to recognize his worth without needing constant reassurance. This does not mean he becomes self-centered or disconnected. It means he becomes grounded. He builds a sense of self that is not easily shaken by external circumstances or the presence or absence of another person. Self-love is often misunderstood as indulgence or arrogance, but in reality, it is about respect and care. It is about treating yourself with the sameness and kindness and patience that you would offer to someone you deeply care about. And it means acknowledging your flaws without harsh judgment and at the same time taking responsibility for your growth. A man who develops this kind of inner love does not ignore his weaknesses. He works on them not out of shame, but out of a desire to become better. This internal foundation changes the way he experiences relationships. When love comes from within, he does not approach others with desperation or neediness. He does not expect someone else to fix his insecurities or carry his emotional weight. Instead, he comes into relationships as a complete individual, capable of giving and receiving love in a healthy way. This creates balance because the connection is based on mutual respect and understanding rather than dependency. Another important aspect of this idea is emotional stability. When love is built internally, a man becomes less affected by rejection or loss. This does not mean he does not feel pain, but he does not lose himself in the process. He understands that his value does not decrease because someone else fails to see it. This allows him to move forward with dignity rather than becoming bitter or closed off. There is also a sense of freedom that comes with internal love. Without the constant need for external validation, a man is able to live more authentically. He makes decisions based on what aligns with his values rather than what will gain approval or attention. He is not afraid to be alone because his sense of love and worth does not depend on being in a relationship. This freedom allows him to grow in ways that would not be possible if he were constantly seeking validation from others. Over time, this internal love becomes a source of strength. It provides stability during difficult times, clarity during confusion, and confidence during uncertainty. It acts as a foundation that supports every other aspect of life, from personal growth to relationships and purpose. A man who has built this foundation does not crumble easily because he is not relying on something outside of himself to hold him together. It is important to understand that this does not mean rejecting love from others. Human connection is valuable and relationships can bring joy, support, and companionship. But when love begins within, these connections become additions to a life that is already whole rather than solutions to a life that feels incomplete. This distinction is crucial because it determines whether a relationship becomes a source of growth or a source of dependency. In the end, love that begins within is the most sustainable kind. It is not easily taken away. It does not depend on circumstances, and it does not fade when challenges arise. It grows as a man grows, evolving with his experiences and strengthening over time. And when he shares that love with others, it comes from a place of abundance, not lack, creating deeper, more meaningful connections that are built on strength, not need. In the end, the life of a man who walks alone is not a story of absence, but a story of becoming, is a journey shaped by self-discovery, guided by personal truth, strengthened through emotional independence, driven by purpose, and rooted in a deep sense of inner love. While the world may measure success by relationships and external validation, he chooses a different path, one that is quieter, but far more powerful. He learns that solitude is not something to fear, but something to embrace. He understands that society's expectations do not define his reality, and that his truth is something he must discover and protect. Through challenges and moments of doubt, he builds emotional strength that allows him to stand firm without needing constant reassurance. He creates purpose not for recognition, but for meaning, and he nurtures love within himself before seeking it from others. This path is not always easy, and it is not always understood, but it is real, it is honest, and it is deeply transformative, because a man who has learned to be whole on his own does not walk through life searching to be completed. He walks with clarity, confidence, and control over his own direction. And when love, connection, or companionship eventually finds him, it will not be something he depends on to survive, but something he chooses to enhance a life he has already built. Until then, and even beyond that, he remains grounded in one powerful truth, that everything he needs to become who he is meant to be has been within him all along.